Now continuing on in our storeroom layout portion of this section, I want to address 17 different storeroom layout considerations which are going to be covered on pages 17A and 17B. So starting off on page 17, the first data element addresses the storage area for all commodities. Now, when we talk about storage area for commodities, there are two things to consider: square foot and cubic displacement. And this will become a little more apparent when we get into some of the other exhibits where we're actually going to calculate the cubic displacement of items that are going to be stored in the maintenance storeroom. And if you recall, we addressed those issues earlier in some of the exhibits in this section, but here we're actually going to go through the computation. The second element addresses all of the storage facilities, such as the racks, the bins, the cantilevers, the carousels, and any other physical requirement to house spare parts and other related storeroom materials. The third consideration is aisle space. Now, since the forklift truck industry has done an excellent job of downsizing the sizes of the various forklift trucks and cherry pickers or highboys that generally are used in a storeroom, then two elements should be considered relative to aisle space. One, the aisle should be no more than 2 inches wider than the vehicle's widest portion on the vehicle itself. Secondly, you may want to consider one-way aisles, especially in medium and large size operations. Many storerooms can be compressed by 30 to 40% if we merely take a look at the way we are not utilizing aisles properly. Remember, aisle is square footage. There is no storage capability in an aisle, so we're losing what we call all of those air rights relative to cubic displacement, which is used in developing storage requirements. The receiving area is going to be another key element in terms of its location and the floor space required. Likewise, receiving inspection, and in many cases, those two data elements, item 4 and 5, can be combined into the same area. But remember, when we receive an item in those combined conditions, then we want to be able to institute receive and inspection immediately so that we don't pile up a lot of parts that are received and then stage them waiting for receive and inspection. The next element, item 6, addresses the shipping area. And here again, we have to consider what goes into the shipping area, like maybe a work table or bench. We also may need a weigh scale to get the gross weight of the shipment, and maybe an area for the shipping cartons and also the various shipping documents that may be required. We have another issue of the issue counter itself, and that is where should that be located and how many issue counters should we have. Again, it depends upon the size of the storeroom and the size of the craft organization that the storeroom is supporting. We have different security devices. People are getting away from the lock and the key. Many companies are now moving toward the card type of a insert into a reader, card reader. And believe it or not, there are a few of my clients that have actually installed palm readers. By putting your hand on a palm reader, it actually determines whether you are approved to enter the storeroom. I don't think you have to go that far. Most of those palm readers have been instituted by pharmaceutical companies because there are other types of items that are in the maintenance storeroom over and above, let's say, the normal spare parts and other maintenance materials. But try and eliminate the key and lock situation and get into some automated storage requirement for security purposes. We also have to consider the counting equipment. Counting equipment could be localized in one area, but preferably in larger storerooms, we may want the counting equipment to be supported on, let's say, a four-wheel dolly that has pneumatic tires to eliminate any vibration for the counting equipment, where we can literally go into any part of the storeroom and perform either cycle counting or issue material against, let's say, different work orders or other types of disbursements. Now, continuing on in 17B, we're talking about the material handling equipment in item number 10, and we have to consider two issues here. Using the material handling equipment in a safe working environment, and also where is that material handling equipment going to be stored for, let's say, off-shift requirements. Item 11 is addressing fire protection equipment, and those of you that have worked in storerooms, are currently in a storeroom where you have sprinklers that are overhead, you know, relative to items we're storing in the storeroom. Each, let's say, county or state has their own fire protection ordinances relative to how far below those, let's say, sprinkler heads you have to maintain the inventory. Other things like data processing equipment, which is covered in item number 12. And here we have A, which is a platform or a computer, the terminals that may be required and their location, and also any printers that are required. In printers, we have printers that are dedicated to, let's say, printing out maintenance work orders. We could have smaller printers that are printing out material identification tags. Other printers could be printing out, let's say, copies of purchase orders through the receiving function. And some may also be required to print out purchase orders where we're going to send material out to a supplier for repair or also for replacement. And last, we may want to consider the barcode applications in the storeroom. As an integral part of the shipping activity, item 13 is addressing the packaging equipment. And then we get into other areas like 14, office space. Now, office space generally takes up a lot of square footage, and my advice is to keep office space up in some mezzanine. And the companies that I've worked with that have office space in a mezzanine, I found that it's very useful for the individuals that are going up and down to help in any personal overweight situation. In other words, it's good for the figure. Again, employee locker areas may be a consideration if you have what is called a centralized maintenance storeroom. And associated with locker areas would be lunch and rest areas and sanitation facilities. You see, I've worked in many, many different companies, and what I'm trying to do here is to put together a comprehensive list, as I've indicated earlier in this section, which would support not only the small, the medium, but the very large size maintenance storeroom. Now again, no list is ever complete, so item 18 and beyond are for your additional requirements that are not covered on pages 17A and 17B. Now, since we're talking about the layout of the storeroom itself, now we want to get into the commodities that would go into the storeroom relative to supporting the maintenance management organization. And you're going to see we're addressing just about every major commodity, at least that I have had experience with. The first one on page number 18A would be the spare parts commodity codes, and that is also identified by the family code. We have number 2, the staging area for planned maintenance work orders. Now see, many of these items we've talked about previously in this seminar. Now we're going to bring them in to actual physical locations within the storeroom. We have item 3, vendor stocking program items. Now those can be also what we would call consigned vendor items in, which I will also discuss in a moment. We have the bench stock items or the 2-bin system, which addresses item 4. Item 5 is the extra security items, which is the bonded crib. Item 6 is the consigned vendor items in. Remember, that inventory is owned by the vendor, and you only pay for it when you use it. It's an integral part of the reduction of inventory investment as a byproduct of the maintenance work order planning and scheduling system. We may have item 7, engineering project items, and those would be really temporary requirements to house those items. Likewise, item number 8, the contractor project items. And then there may be some unique special items that are not part of commodity codes that may be housed in the storeroom. One that I could think of would be parts that are not part of the PM or major minor overhaul that we identified in our, let's say, inventory classification codes, which was code number 01. Then we have items like lubricants, and here, you know, how are we going to store it and how are we going to dispense the lubricant? Item 11 addresses janitorial supplies. Item number 12 are the tools used by maintenance personnel for specific maintenance work orders. And moving on to the next page, we're looking at the equipment for maintenance work orders. And then 14 addresses that special storage environmental items, which we discussed previously when we were looking at our item master record layout. Item 15 is the ability to store inspection tools and gauges for the maintenance work orders, and those could be an integral part of the tools and the equipment, but here we're addressing the tools and gauges for maintenance work orders separately. We have safety items, which is item number 16. The inventory class code 1, which I've addressed earlier, but in that previous illustration there could be other items that are not part of inventory class code 1. 18 addresses the shipping supplies. 19 are the shelf life requirements. And then 20 would be an area where we would have set aside for items that have become obsolete pending disposition. 21 addresses the material handling equipment used within the storeroom. 22 is the counting equipment. 23 addresses the packaging equipment, and again 24 and 25 and so forth would be your additional commodities that are in the storeroom that are not an integral part of the storeroom listing that we have just gone through. Now, other items that I could quickly think of would be safety items for operational personnel. In a lot of cases, the storerooms, that is the maintenance storeroom, is housing those items for operating personnel. And those are, you could add to that other items, but you have to determine where they're going to be stored and how are they going to be stored. Now, moving on to the next series of pages, we're going to address the calculation of this cubic displacement that I've made reference to several times previously in this section. So I'm going to address the data elements that are on page number 19, and then we're going to go into the actual calculation and then show you how this storage bin size coding system is actually put together. Now remember, this has to be tailored to support your own maintenance storeroom. I'm going to give you a general idea on how to do it, and again, you're going to have to tailor it. First, I need a part number. I need the number of annual receipts. I need the average or maximum quantity stored, and I gave you that formula before. We want to calculate the cubic displacement of the average or maximum receipt. We want to also develop the total weight so that we can determine the proper storage facility. We want to identify the storage facilities by some type of a bin numbering system. And then we also want to have the ability to calculate the number of bins or the number of storage racks that are required by part number. So those are the steps from 1 to 7 to provide you with, let's say, the roadmap to the calculation process. So what I'm going to do on page 20 is address a particular item with the data elements, and then we're going to go through the calculation of those data elements. I have part number 16402. The dimensions of that particular item are 10 inches by 3 inches by 4 inches. So the cubic displacement multiplying those three dimensions as I've identified in step 3 gives us a total of 120 cubic inches. Now the average inventory stored based upon in evaluation of last year's requirements, that is the transactions, and this year's forecast, looking at the item in terms of its continued activity within the maintenance, planning, and scheduling system, and also including safety stock, we're going to have an average inventory on hand of 350 units. Now, we have taken the previous order quantity, which is 1/2 of that. We've added the current order quantity to that, and in this case what we're doing is we're adding the safety stock portion. Sometimes the safety stock portion is an integral part of the current order quantity. It depends upon the bin on hand at the point that we actually issued the new order quantity. Now the total storage space required, 120 cubic inches multiplied by 350 units would be 42,000 cubic inches. And that divided by 1,728, which is the cubic inches per cubic foot, would indicate that we need 24.3, and we're not going to be theoretical. We're going to round that up to 25 cubic feet of storage space. We have developed a storage bin size and numbering system for this illustration, and storage bin number 5 will accommodate the height of 36 inches, the width of 48 inches, and the depth of 36 inches. See, that's the actual shelving space plus the height, which gives us a total of 36 cubic feet of space per bin. Since bin number 1 is providing us 36 cubic feet, and we actually need 25 cubic feet for our lot size that we're going to carry, then we would need one number bin 5 for part number 16042. Now these steps that we've gone through, steps 1 to 4, is very easy to identify in a little PC-based system. And that's what we've used in the past for larger, medium size and larger companies where they actually wanted to go through this calculation process to determine how many different storage bins would I need by storage bin number. And one of the things that we want to do next is to address the storage bin numbering system for you. So if you look at 21A, and we'll finalize that on 21B, we have taken some of the more traditional items that are found in a maintenance storeroom, like item 1, cabinets. Now we have different size cabinets. The individual drawers are different in terms of the width, the depth, and the height. And those are identified by 1A, 1B, 1C, and so forth. So the 1 signifies a cabinet drawer, the A, B, C, and etc. Alpha characters identifies the specific dimension of the drawers within the cabinet. Item 2 is addressing shelving. So here again, we have the same basic requirement as we have shown you on the previous exhibit. Shelvings are generally for small cartons or tote pans. And tote pans could be considered made from corrugated, they could be made from steel, or they could be made from plastic. It depends upon how you're going to store items. So again, the 2 signifies the shelving as the method of storage, and the A, B, C, and so forth are the size of the shelves. Item 3, we get into shelving racks, and those are for skids, which will take a higher weight requirement than item 2 above. So we have the same type of calculation required based upon the identification of the different shelving racks that we're going to consider in our storeroom as 3A, 3B, 3C, and etc. 4 are cantilevers. And cantilevers, if you remember, are those items that actually would house bar stock and piping and tubing in a horizontal plane. And cantilevers would be identified in terms of the extension of the cantilever arm associated with the weight that I could put on the cantilever itself. So in this case, cantilevers are identified as item 4, the method of storage, and then A, B, C, and so forth are the sizes, that is the extension from the base of the cantilever, that is the upright base, and the weight that I could place on that cantilever by part number. 5 are cradles for drums and carboys, and a cradle is nothing more than an item that I could horizontally rest a drum or a carboy on. They're kind of cut out, they look like they're scalloped. They could be individual cradles, or there could be a series of cradles over a longer period of time, and the dimension of that cradle. So again, cradles are identified by the dimensions A, B, C, just like we've used previously. Moving on to 21B, items that are going to be bulk stored. We call that floor stacking and all floor stacking items, and this would pertain to much of the equipment that we would house in the maintenance storeroom would be identified as item number 6, and the A, B, and C really pertains to the square footage for each one of those items. Item 7 pertains to maintenance equipment, and again, we can have other types of storage requirements. So these storage systems, the type of storage requirement, and their sizes actually is generating what we call a storage bin size numbering system. And it is this numbering system that can be used for the layout of the storeroom. Now, the following 4 pages, and I am now on page 22A, are going to illustrate the various steps that are required in order to establish a storeroom bin location numbering system. There are 4 pages to consider, pages 23 to 26. Let me kind of address the different data elements that are found on page 22A before we move into those other pages. Page number 23, and this is kind of like an index, is the storeroom material code listing showing the first field of the part number. This is what I have been referring to as the commodity or the family code. All part numbers within that commodity are preceded by that family code. This allows us to pull all those part numbers together through some type of a sorting process where we can identify all individual part numbers within a family or commodity. Now, moving to the 3rd paragraph, page number 24 is the bin layout for a storeroom using what we had identified earlier as a straight numeric numbering scheme. And when we get to that particular exhibit, I'll address how that numbering scheme is actually developed and how it's used. Page number 25 is the bin layout for a storeroom using what we call odd-even. And again, I'll address the odd-even application when we get to page number 25. Now, moving on to page 22, we have on the top paragraph a reference to page number 26, and this is a bin location numbering system for the row that a bin is found in, and we actually get down to the shelving number within that, let's say, bin section, and then we also can identify the section that material is going to be stored in within a particular shelf. So that's like the roadmap of where an item is in a very small to a very large storeroom operation. The last paragraph addresses the notation that there are many types of storeroom bin row numbering systems. Those identified in this section are the most commonly used, and therefore we want to address those that are the most commonly used. And if you have your own numbering scheme and it's working, please continue to use it. If you feel that you may want to change it, then please make the changes accordingly. So on page 23, we're identifying the first field of what we call the storeroom material code. We've identified that as the commodity or the family code. And you'll notice we start with 0, 1, all the way in the upper left-hand corner, and then the last code is located as 99 in the lower right-hand corner of the outline. And you'll also notice 99 addresses a term obsolete. When you set up a part numbering system, and this is not a program in part numbering, but we are going to address part numbers in the storeroom. But when you develop your own part numbering system, you're going to find that you have to identify and tag all items that are in the storeroom. There are going to be items that are probably obsolete, and there's no way that you can identify whether that item is usable or not. So at that point in time, our advice is to tag those items with a 99 code, which says they belong to an obsolescence family, and then at some point in time, you're going to have to institute the procedures and the policies to identify, are they truly obsolete, and if they are, you're going to have to identify the physical method of disposition. So this particular document on page 23 addresses one company's first field commodity code or family code. And that really is the starting point to sort out all of the part numbers that make up those individual families. Then, if I looked at the item master record for each one of those part numbers, I could address the cubic displacement issue, I could address the weight issue, I could go through those calculations that we previously went through, and I could start to develop by storage bin number the number of bins required by part number. And the name of the game in a storeroom is to keep all of the part numbers within a commodity or family in the same general area. That's going to be easy for people to find material on off-shift requirements. It's going to be very easy to institute cycle counting, because if I can't locate one item, that tells me two items could be misplaced, and if they fall within a commodity, you have a very small area to peruse through to try and find the proper parts, and then make corrections to the individual source documents that identify the items. Now, on page 24, here is the layout for what we call a straight numeric layout application. You will notice, and I'm going to kind of walk through the middle of the storeroom, which is the main aisle, and all of the rows of the bins are identified by 1 and then 2, so the progression is straight numeric. We go to the last double row, which is row 9 and 10, and then we're going to go across the aisle to 11 and 12, and then moving all the way down on the right-hand portion of the center aisle, we have rows number 19 and 20. That is a straight numeric setup. There are some items that are going to be stored in that one row all the way in the back of the stockroom. Since we're trying to keep things in a numeric requirement, then in that particular row all the way in the back of the stockroom, we're going to use a alpha character for the bin location. See, the row is all the way in the back of the stockroom. I don't have to put a row number. And if any location starts off with an alpha, A through M, we automatically know that that's in the back of the stockroom. And therefore, I now have completed what we call an overview, a layout of the storeroom, using straight numeric logic and identifying the rows. Now, each row is sectionalized into sections. So if you look at row 1 and 2, you will notice that we have sections A, B, C, D, and E, and the same logic is also utilized in the balance of the rows. So if an item is stored in row 1A, I know specifically where it is. Now what I have to do is to define the shelf number within that section A, and then the section of the shelf number within a particular, let's say, shelving number. We'll address that in a moment. You'll also notice down at the bottom of this storeroom layout, we have identified where we're going to receive material, where the issue cage is going to be located, and also where the shipping is going to be required. Now, again, because of the size of our source document here, it's very difficult to try and indicate where other materials would be housed, like material handling equipment and all those other items that we previously had reviewed. But this document is intended to show you how a straight numeric bin row numbering system is developed. Now, if you would turn the page, we are now going to look at what we call odd even. And again, this is strictly a choice. Odd even more or less resembles the way street addresses are identified for various buildings that are on a street. And many companies like to select the odd even because people that look at street addresses know that the odds are on one side, that is the address, and the evens are on another. It's a matter of choice. Again, we have the same type of an application. If I start off in the left side of the center aisle, you'll notice I have 1, 3 for the first double row, and then I go to 5, 7, and so forth. Now, coming down or going up, I should say, from the bottom, I have 2, 4, and 6, 8. Now, you notice there is a difference. If I go straight numeric, I went up starting at the left-hand side of the aisle, and then I cascaded across and I came down. That's a numeric sequence. Since we're odd even, the odd rows are on the left-hand side and the evens are on the right-hand side. And again, we show the bin locations by the alpha characters A, B, C, D, and E. And likewise, the row all the way in the back of the storeroom is the same as we had described in the previous exhibit. These are the two most common bin location systems for rows. Now the next exhibit that we want to address is the bin location for shelving and then also for a subsection within a shelf. So what I've tried to do here is to address one of the bins by section, and in this particular case we are in vertical section number 4, and that's identified by the nomenclature described in the lower left-hand side, which is the complete bin location system for a particular item. But let's look at the various data elements, and then we'll get into how those data elements can comprise a particular bin location numbering system. First of all, in the left-hand side, a little above the middle, we have a storeroom number. Now, in this case, this company has 2 storerooms, storeroom 1 and storeroom 2. So they have a decentralized storeroom program. Moving down, it also indicates that we are in row number 10. If we continue down to the center of the data, which is below the bin layout, you'll notice there is a term vertical section number 6. So in this case, the data elements would read 2-10-6. That would get me to the right storeroom. 2. 10 gets me to the proper row, and 6 gets me to the proper vertical section. Now I have to find out what shelf number the item is going to be found in. And if you look at the vertical line on the left-hand side, going from 1 all the way up to 8, you always start off with identifying the lowest shelf as 1. Even if you may place material on, let's say, the floor that may be on some type of a small skid, that is 1. So as I continue upwards, we progress by ones, and in this particular case, we have the ability to house material on 8 different shelves. And if you go up to the center of that shelf layout, you'll notice we have what we call a shelf section number. And again, we go from left to right, and here we're using an alpha character, starting off with A and progressing through B, C, and so forth up to F. Now, the way those individual location data elements would be put together in a particular item record location system is identified down at the bottom, and I've changed the data around a little bit. So let us look down starting with 2-10, and then over on the right-hand side, I've identified the highest order of identity to the lowest, and that is that 2 is the stockroom, 10 is the row number, 4 is the vertical section number, 4 is the shelf number, and C is the section within that particular shelf. You'll notice that each one of those location identities is separated by a dash. And my advice is to separate those by a dash even when you mechanize, that is when you computerize, because it's real easy for people to read those data elements. When you jumble them together, you don't know whether a bin location is 1 or whether it's 11. So the dashes helps to identify the individual location elements, and putting it all together gives me the ability to go specifically to a section on a shelf within a very small or large storeroom. Now, moving on to page number 27, we have talked previously about identification of parts. There may be some consideration, especially in maybe medium and large size companies, where you may want to have what we call permanent physical identification. So what we're going to do is look at a few methods of permanent identification. The first one addresses a part number to be actually put on the item as it is manufactured. Items that are compression and injection molded, and maybe those that are manufactured through an investment cast process, or maybe through a foundry process, and even those that are produced through, let's say, metal stamping via a punch press operation could have the part number identified on that particular item when it's manufactured. That has to be considered when the item, is going to be designed and ultimately put into the spare parts list program. Since 99% of all items are purchased, then here's something that you're going to have to work with the supplier of the equipment and get their support and parts identification. Step number 2 indicates that you could stamp the number on the item after it's manufactured. And you have a couple stamping processes. You could use cold stamp or you could use hot stamp. And again, item 1 and 2 are addressing those items where you may have large quantities that are moving in and through the maintenance storeroom. There are some industry standards where you could color code. Bar stock would be a typical illustration, and those color codes can be provided to you by your bar stock supplier. Step 4 identifies the hang tags. There are cards that can be developed for items, for containers as an example. Now those would be placed right in the container like a tote pan. There are hang tags that can be physically secured to items like motors and large physical items, gear reducers and the like. And then there's labels that can be put on the front, let's say, of a container. And of course there are others, but I'm merely addressing the 3 that are most prevalently used in the storeroom. Now item 5 addresses items that are a little different from, let's say, item number 2 above, using a hot or cold stamping process. And that is, there are some materials that you could purchase from a supply house, and it's called liquid chalk. Some refer to it as metal chalk, and you actually print the part number on an item, and once that hardens, it literally turns to steel. People have tried to get those part numbers off with chisels, and they can't. And there are other types which can be put on, like marking pens or any other type of an application. The key in utilizing page number 27 in your identification program is least cost and 100% identification of all items at any point in time that those items are an integral part of the maintenance storeroom or have been issued out against maintenance work orders. Now, Exhibit 28 identifies some of the storage facilities that we had discussed previously in pages 21A and 21B. This is a list of, again, the more common storage facilities. Now, what you have to do is to make your own list up, like I mentioned before, look at the sizes of the various facilities, and then develop your coding scheme. As an example, the numeric number that's on the left-hand side of each one of these storage facilities could be a starting point for you, and then on the right-hand side of the description, I could put the alpha characters, A, B, C, and so forth, with their specific size. This, therefore, would become your storage facility coding system, or you may want to call it your storage facility matrix. But this is how you get started in developing the identification of various storage facilities, like I said, that we discussed with you on pages 21A and 21B. Page 29 addresses the various material handling devices that we have seen in various maintenance storerooms. Some of these are used for outside storage, and many of these are used for inside storage. My comment relative to material handling devices is as follows. You need an employee training program for each one of these items. Number 2, the training program may be introduced by your insurance carrier. You could also determine from local and state regulators what types of training programs they have relative to these material handling devices, or you may develop your own. The next step is to train the people, and after the training session, have a testing procedure to make certain that that individual knows all of the fundamentals in the applications of the material handling devices. And once you go through this testing process, make certain that the employee will sign his or her test indicating that they have been satisfactorily tested, and that document should be placed in the employee's file in the Human Resource Department, because that document is going to eliminate a lot of problems later on if an accident does occur, God forbid, and the employee turns around and says, I have not been trained properly, and I've seen this happen in the past, and you may have also. That document is going to save a lot of litigation and expense on your part. Now, moving into some of the other major activities in the storeroom, on page 30, I am addressing the 3 steps for receiving. The first step is to receive the material. Now, the reason we have identified the receiving function in 3 steps, as I said a moment ago when we talked about, let's say, storeroom layout, maybe it's going to be impractical because of physical constraints to have the carrier that is delivering material to your facility from the supplier deliver it directly into, let's say, the maintenance storeroom. So therefore, step 1 can be performed, like I said earlier, by a central receiving dock. But these are the data elements that they have to go through relative to proper receiving, and especially if there is noted damage on the carton or the item. Take a picture of it with an Instamatic camera, and then that information should be given to the financial department as well as maintenance purchasing, so that we are in a position to support any litigation if litigation is a requirement against the carrier. The second step is the count material, but here again, if I have 2 or more containers, each container is going to be identified with a copy of the purchase order if the item is a purchased item, or a copy of the manufactured order if the item is manufactured, and we are going to verify the count in step number 2. In step 3, on that same, let's say, document that we used in step number 2, we're going to identify that we have actually gone through receive and inspection where receive and inspection is a requirement. Those source documents are retained in that particular carton, container, or attached to an individual item through a, let's say, a hang tag pouch until the item is actually used. That information, if it requires such things as, let's say, a UL approval tag, then those tags, when that material is dispersed, should be tied in with the maintenance work order so that we have a complete audit trail based upon who supplied the item, when it was received, when it was inspected, and what work order, that is maintenance work order, the item was actually issued against. Now, moving on to 31A, we're going to talk about record keeping for material that is actually received into the storeroom. See, these are the logical steps. Receive it, inspect it. Now we're going to put that material away. 31B is the source document that I made reference to earlier that you may want to consider having as an integral part of the receiving function. Let me go through the different steps on page 31A with you, and then we'll address the document itself. The first thing we want to do is obtain a receiving document for incoming material. That is step number 2 in the previous exhibit. We want to prepare a stockroom location slip. That is a 2-part self-carbonizing form in a manual environment, and that's the document that is on the next page. We're going to give the original copy to the storekeeper, and the individual that's going to put the material away will have the other copy. You could change that around and have the original go with the material and the carbon be retained by the storekeeper. It really doesn't make any difference. You've got an option. When you put the material away in a bin, you're going to note the bin location. Now, some items may require more than one bin, and you'll see in a moment when we look at that source document that we have 4 different bin locations that we could put material away. That copy, after the material is put away, comes back to the storeroom person that's going to update the location record. We match the 2 documents, the one retained by the storeroom record keeper, match that to the one that is being received, and here is where we update the bin location and the quantity and also the date of that transaction. All of that data would be recorded in the item master record, and then you could either retain that document, staple them together, retain it for a few days for audit trail purposes, and then at some point in time you may want to physically dispose of it. Now, if you turn the page to the stockroom location slip, I want to address the 3 different storeroom systems that can utilize this particular form. The first application I addressed was a manual system. So I manually filled in the date, the part number, the receiving slip number, which could have been a purchase order number or a PM work order number or any other numbering scheme that is required. I've got a brief description of the item and the total quantity. And if there's more than one container, we'd indicate 1 or more. We would then separate that document, as I indicated, through page 31A, through the procedure. And then once we put the material away, the person that puts the material in the bin would indicate the bin location, and then this would be returned, matched, and update the records. Now that's manually. If I'm in a computerized environment, I could have this location slip printed at the time of receipt through a dedicated printing program for stockroom location slip system. And the only thing that I would have to really put on this particular record would be the location that the material is going in or the location. So that would be in a computerized environment. The third application is when I barcode the storeroom. I could take the part number and the receiving slip number and the quantity and have all of that material be printed out and barcoded as well. When I go to the bin location to put the material away, I do not have to record it as we've indicated here in a location record, but what I'm going to do after I wand the appropriate data from this location slip, I merely wand, if you will, the bin location number, and then take that data and upload it into the system. So this slip will support manual, it will support computerized, and it will support the enhancement of computerization, which is barcoding. That little right-hand portion where it says change from, to, and by is used strictly in consolidation purposes, where I take 2 or more bin locations, by part number and description and move them from two or more locations into one. So this is a document that has multiple use. The key is bin location record accuracy. Institute this, and if you do it properly, I guarantee mislocations in your storeroom will disappear. Now, continuing with our various storeroom documents, on page 32, we're going to look at some of the data elements relative to the shipping function. And the easiest way that I know of to set up the shipping activity in the maintenance storeroom is to have someone from your shipping department, if you are in, let's say, a manufacturing environment and you do shipping out of your facility, to have someone from the shipping department come into the maintenance storeroom and provide you with all of the different shipping documents, a list of the names and telephone numbers of the various carriers that you would use, and any other data to support the shipping activity. There isn't, a great deal of shipping activity, but you still have to consider the self-contained environment that the maintenance storerooms, through my experience, are moving toward. So the data elements would be the shipping order number. Now that could be your purchase order number as an example, the part number, the description, the unit of measure, the quantity shipped. In most cases, if items are going out for repair, the quantity would be probably 1 or 2. If we're going to return material to a vendor because of a reject or some other particular item, or let's say a shelf life date has expired and we want to have a replacement made, we would develop the date of that shipment and the method of shipment. That would be the carrier. And then prepare the shipping documents, which is very simple. Once you determine the carrier and the carrier's forms, they are generally more than self-explanatory. The bill of lading that you're going to have to generate would indicate the number of containers. And here, if you remember earlier, I said you may need a weighing scale so that you can get the gross weight of the item. And then if somebody, let's say over and above the person that did the actual shipping, if someone did the packaging, or let's say there were more than 2 items going to a supplier, did order filling and processing, we may want to have those individuals identify the tasks that they did relative to supporting that shipment. And then the individual that actually performed all of the shipping documents, and then likewise the distribution of those documents generally to the purchasing department and probably to the financial department. And that again depends on the type of shipment. And then the thing that we want to do is we want to follow up with the supplier, especially if we're returning repairs. We don't get purchasing involved with that activity. That's another key issue where the storeroom is becoming self-contained, and we take that repair function literally away from purchasing and let them spend their time on doing the price negotiation, review new vendors, get into new commodities, develop quotations, and work with the suppliers toward supplier, let's say, certification. Now, if purchasing has to get involved, then as the last item indicates, we would ask the purchasing department to support any shipment based upon the need of their particular requirements. Now, continuing on, again with the data elements and the storeroom documents, the page 33 identifies the storeroom record card. And again, this is a manual record card, and you could format your own record card if you are utilizing CMMS. But looking at the basic data elements on the heading, moving from left to right, we have the description of the item. We have the unit of measure of the item. The next element, the accounting code, is the inventory class code. And then we have the part number and also the revision number. And moving to the body, which is where the various transactions are going to be recorded. And again, moving from left to right, we have the date of the transaction, the type of transaction. If it was, let's say, an issue against a particular maintenance order, then we would indicate the maintenance order number in that second column from the left. If it is a shipping order, like a purchase order, then that purchase order number would be identified. Items that are under, let's say, a lot control requirement, or as an example, where we have shelf life codes, we could identify those lot numbers and shelf life requirements under that third column from the left, which indicates lot number. The next column to its right of the lot number is the quantity. And here, again, all we do is we indicate whether it's a receipt with a plus sign and a issue with a negative sign. And we also keep the location record up to date until that location goes to 0 bin on hand. And then the last column on the right-hand side is the on hand. Now, if you're in a manual environment, this document would be a flip type card, and I'd have the same data once I flipped it over on the back. If we're in a computerized environment, as I mentioned a moment ago, you can tailor this to your own specific requirements as you can with a manual card, and therefore the same data would support either function, manual or computerized. Now, moving on to page 34, we have a need to identify the processing of maintenance work orders. And let me at least address the issue of scheduling a maintenance work order. And I'm going to use the preventative maintenance work order, and that would likewise support either a minor or a major overhaul. There are basically 4 time elements to the work order. The first time element is preparation time, and that is the time that a storeroom needs to receive or either have the work order printed out in the storeroom, be able to extract all of the spare parts required or other types of materials, to obtain the special tools and the equipment. And remember, those 3 categories must all be identified with individual identification tags. And if special, let's say, documentation is required by the craft person, that would likewise be an integral part of the first time element under the heading preparation time. The second time element would be the travel time to the job site. The third time element would consist of many, many steps, and that would be the actual work to be performed. And then the fourth time element would be travel from the job site, maybe back to the maintenance shop or go to another asset and continue on the PM activity. Page 34 and the data elements that are listed under functions are those that are generally found under this first time element called preparation time. Since those are an integral part of the storeroom process time for that maintenance work order, then it should be the responsibility of the storeroom to identify some average time elements that they would require in that summarized first time element of preparation time. So once we understand what preparation time is, then let's take a look at some of those details of preparation time that I just went through but let's address those on page number 34. Process, the maintenance work order, is actually getting it printed or received into the storeroom. We'd have to identify the parts that are required, put the bin locations on the work order, and literally in step number 2, we would go ahead and actually pick the material. At this time, we want to identify all of those items with individual item hang tags, which is item number 3. So there's some time to generate those documents, whether they're manually generated, they're computer generated, or we can computer generate those utilizing barcode applications. If tooling, item number 4, and equipment, item number 5 is required, then those likewise would have to be pulled from the storeroom, identified, and tied in with that particular maintenance order. If, let's say, special gauges are required, such as feeler gauges, or anything else that is needed by the craft person to inspect the item after the maintenance work has been accomplished, those would be identified in step number 6. Maybe special documentation is required, and therefore there's the time element to go to a file wherever that file is located. It could be in the storeroom, it could be in the manager's, that is the maintenance manager's office, or it could be housed in facilities engineering. So what we want to do is to identify the time elements, generally in minutes, for each one of these steps 8 to 7, and then we could summarize those, and that would be the total preparation time for that order. Now, step number 8 indicates that if I am going to deliver this work order's material to the job site, then I likewise may want to estimate that, because I'd like to try and have the material arrive to the job site when the craft person is going to also arrive at the job site. It's a coordination that is required between the work order planning and scheduling system, the craft labor reporting system, and the storeroom. And again, it's important to have storeroom personnel at least be trained on how the work order planning and scheduling and the reporting of functions are actually developed, and the routine and the method of reporting, so that we can commingle those right in with the delivery of material to the job site. So again, the first time element on a work order is preparation time, and the data to develop that is on page 34. Please use this data and go through the steps of trying to determine incrementally what these individual time elements are. Try not to ballpark a figure by putting all of these into one figure without going through the detail of estimating, because you're going to find you may be wrong, and you really may not have a sufficient time to go through this preparation activity. Now, talking about issuing material out of the storeroom, some companies, especially medium-sized and larger companies, as a byproduct of, let's say, the transaction register, remember, number of receipts, number of putaways and bin location, number of issues, number of cycle count transactions, and also the number of consolidations. Well, in many cases, companies would like to get a more definitive outline in terms of the various issues or disbursements from the storeroom. And this is basically for management review to determine those activities that are creating the largest number of transactions. So this listing is very comprehensive, and what you have to do is pick and choose to determine, number 1, do I want to do this? And number 2, if I do, which are the data elements that I would like to keep track of. The first one are standard maintenance work orders, which would be unplanned. Second is the PM work orders. Third would be truly those emergencies, which likewise are unplanned. Fourth is the miscellaneous requisitions, would be unplanned. And then 5 and 6 would address the major and minor overhauls, which are planned. The repair orders, item number 7, would be an integral part of the two-bin system in terms of replenishing inventory in the various repair shops, so we could actually keep track of those disbursements. If there are projects such as expansion or other types of projects, we'd want to keep track of those issues. Purchase repair orders where we're actually sending material to the supplier. If we have more than one storeroom or maybe more than one facility, there may be a need to transfer material between storerooms and facilities, and those would be identified by step number 10. And step number 11 would be shipping return goods by either a purchase order or a manufacturing order. And item 12 is the disposition of obsolescence. There may be some other types of disbursements that you may want to add to this list. All it requires is a disbursement transaction with a specific code. So if you have a menu pop up in a CMMS system, you can have this disbursement record also be shown in a window, and therefore you really don't have to go back to any particular file or record. They're right there for your pick and choose. Now, the next document pertains to what we call a second and third shift miscellaneous material requisition. Now, there's no such thing as a second and third shift miscellaneous requisition. But remember, if the storeroom is secured, there are no people in the storeroom to support it on the second and third shift, then we may require, because maintenance personnel are supporting operations on those shifts, we need some type of a document to indicate when there has been a disbursement out of the storeroom. So in this case, we encourage people to set up some type of a manual document like this. In fact, that's the exact size that we generally recommend. And we want a minimum amount of data to be recorded on this particular document. We want the part number and a brief description and the date and the shift of the issue. Now, in the body of the particular document, all we need would be the equipment or asset number that is going to utilize that part. We haven't created a maintenance work order. We haven't gone through the estimating process of the time of the maintenance order. That's why we call this a miscellaneous requisition. Once that item has been completed, the individual that actually is going to remove material from the storeroom would put his or her name there, and this document is retained in the storeroom in a little suspense file. The next day, when the storeroom becomes operational, the inventory record could be updated. This document would be given to the planner scheduler. Again, the integration of the storeroom with planning and scheduling. A work order could be generated to capture not only the part number or parts that were used for that particular maintenance operation, but also the time of the craft labor, and then we could generate the true cost for maintaining that asset on an off-shift environment, and the work order can be closed out immediately since all of the data has been accumulated and subsequently reported in the various reports that are required and files are updated. Now, who should disperse the material? I said earlier we can go through a couple different applications. Maybe one of the craft person on the second or third shift would be trained in terms of how to read a bin location record, how to find parts, and see, this is another key byproduct of having a storeroom laid out by commodity or family, how to fill out this document, and how to secure the stock room after he or she leaves the maintenance storeroom. Another application could be maybe a supervisor from that department from operations. We also have seen setup personnel from operations for that department be trained on how to record these miscellaneous second and third shift requirements. Another one, some companies will actually use the security guard or guards within the organization, depending on the size of the company. There are different methods that we have instituted with many of our clients in the past. They've worked very nicely. The key is to get the discipline and the associated systems, the procedures, which are very simple, and then the training, which is a key requirement. And if you follow, you know, the applications that I have just gone through, you should have a successful second and third shift method of supplying parts from the storeroom and retain data integrity of both the inventory and the storeroom records. Now, moving toward the issuance of material handling to the job site, you notice back in our organization chart, we had a little area called material handling, and we've addressed that previously when we were putting together the time elements for preparation time. The last item on that document was material handling. Well, a person in the storeroom could process the maintenance order, do all of the identification, get all of the parts, tools, and equipment and documentation together. But another person may actually move the material to the job site. So what we're trying to do here with page number 37 is to get a check and balance between the storeroom and a storeroom person actually transporting the material to the job site. So part of the training would be to make certain that the part number, the description, the unit of measure, and quantity for all spare parts is recorded. We want to make certain that the order number is identified, and in many cases the order would actually be associated or accompanied with the spare parts. Are there other things such as tooling and equipment that may be required, or other documentation, and those would be identified under 5 at the bottom where it says others as required. You also want to make certain that the individual that processed the order has his or her stamp recorded on the order, and also the date that that was actually accomplished. But most importantly, the department and the machine or asset number where that material is going to be delivered to. Again, you could see that we have some variable data required here, and again, I want you to pick and choose and develop your own strategic plan to make certain that when material is being delivered by a material handler within the storeroom organization, that there is a check and balance between the person that did the order processing and developed all of the picking requirements plus the materials and so forth, and that check and balance against the material handler. And moving on to the next exhibit, we're talking about a decentralized storeroom. We're still in the issuing process, and this decentralized storeroom is that little box in the lower right-hand corner of department number 14. The material that's housed in that decentralized storeroom is the material that is generally used by those 4 operating departments. There would be an inventory record for those items, the description, unit of measure and quantity in that little storeroom. And generally, the maintenance person that is going to that job site would actually withdraw the material and indicate on the inventory record, and these generally would be manually. If it's in a computerized environment, then the storeroom in general would update the disbursement of that material, and the craft person, all he or she has to do is to obtain the proper part number, the quantity, and apply that to the maintenance work order and continue on to perform that craft activity. It is not necessary in many cases within a medium to a large size company to have a central storeroom by itself. It pays to consider decentralized storage, especially those items that are used quite frequently. It is parallel to the concept of having material in, let's say, your own internal repair shops that's supported by a two-bin or bench stock program. Now, some of the additional documents and forms that the storeroom would be instrumental in processing are identified on page number 39. And this page is similar to an outline or an index, if you will, of the individual document. So let me walk you through these particular pages. I'll identify what the form is, and then we'll take a look at the various forms and documents themselves. Page number 40 is a PM work order form. Page number 41 is a maintenance work order form. So in this case, 40 would be used for planned requirements, and page 41 could be used as unplanned maintenance requirements. Page number 42 is a maintenance detailed work order plan, which is used by the planner scheduler, but can be supported by the storeroom based upon the time element that would go in the first operation or sequence preparation time. Page number 43 is a storeroom crib tool and equipment issue ticket. And as you'll see, there is a notation on the ticket relative to charging the cost of that equipment or that tool to the individual craft person if that tool is not returned back to the storeroom. Now that seems like a disciplinary step, and before you institute a program like that, it must be reviewed and approved by top management. It should be reviewed and approved by your human resource department, and also it should be discussed in detail by the entire maintenance organization. Page number 44 is a maintenance work order parts identification tag. There are many identification tags. This happens to be one that can be used as an individual tag, or it could likewise be used where we would literally physically wire, if you will, that hang tag to a particular item like a motor, a gear reducer, or some other large spare part item. Page number 36 is a second and third shift miscellaneous item, which we have already discussed. So I'm keeping that in here as a cross-reference because these are the forms and documents that I made reference to that you want to retain in a 3-ring binder, which you can use as a training aid relative to training new employees. So turning to page 40, this is a typical maintenance work order for a PM requirement, and there's a note in the center of that particular document which indicates that the spare parts that are required for this PM work order are shown on the operation numbers that are reflected in the left-hand column under OPER, O-P-E-R, which is abbreviation for operation number. If any tools, equipment, and special documentation is required, then likewise those tools, the equipment, and document numbers would likewise appear by the operation number where they are going to be used. If this document was going to be used to deliver material to the job site, then you notice in the heading of this particular PM4 form, we have not only the equipment name, but the equipment number on the left and the right-hand corners of the top of the document, but in the middle is the location. And that's extremely important when we want to have the storeroom deliver the PM document with all of the associated items to the job site. Now, continuing on page number 41, this is a work order which could be used for unplanned requirements. But you'll also notice that up on the top, the third line, we indicate the type of work. And if it were planned, and if it were a PM, we'd probably want to use the preceding page. Likewise, we could use the preceding document for major and minor overhauls. And again, we have the ability to pick material, and plus all of the tooling and other requirements which really would be recorded in the center portion where it says spare parts required. In this case, the identification of tools, equipment, and document was left off of the report for the picking process, but you notice they are identified individually by a line item which is in really the center of the page. Here again, we would have to process this based upon the bin locations to be able to pull those items. And in most cases, since this document, like I said previously, is to support unplanned requirements, very seldom are these types of work orders delivered to the job site. In the majority of the cases, this document and all of its associated items would be actually picked up by the craft person from the maintenance storeroom. Now on page 42, we're addressing what we call a maintenance work order plan. And this work order plan is the development of a planned requirement. It could be the development of an unplanned work order that could be scheduled. And this document is used to indicate, since we're planning, the steps, which in this case is called item, in the center of the body called work elements. And the first step would be, let's say, preparation time. And here is where the time would be estimated by the storeroom and subsequently recorded on this planning sheet. All of the spare parts and other information would be located in the bottom portion, and then this document can literally be transformed into a PM work order, a major minor overhaul, or it could support an unplanned work order request, but based upon, let's say, the degree of priority of the item, we could actually schedule this type of a work order. The next document on page 43 is that tool or equipment disbursement record that I mentioned earlier. You notice it has a date, and it signifies tools, but again, this could be for equipment or any type of tooling or gauges. So where it says tools, would we identify that by number and full description? Now, the things that are identified in the body of this document, as I indicated, should be reviewed and approved by top management and also by human resource, and this document should be introduced to all craft personnel in the maintenance department. Let me kind of walk you through the language. The above list of tools is to be returned in good condition within 30 days from the above date. The reason for that time period is as a byproduct of planning and then subsequently scheduling, we may find that a craft person could use the same tool on more than one work order. If that tool is not required for additional maintenance work orders, then this individual could actually retain the tool. Now this is a company's document. You may want to indicate that the tool must be returned to the storeroom once the job is complete. Now here is the key data relative to supporting the financial loss of the tool. In the event of failure to return or the malicious destruction of the tools, and this ABC is the company name, Industries, Inc., is authorized to make payroll deductions for the direct costing of replacing said tools. There's a place for the employee to sign it, and there's a clock number. Now, you may think that, gee, this is a really harsh process where we're going to, let's say, have employees, especially in the maintenance department, pay for lost tooling. This particular company kept track of tools that were lost. Over 1 year, they had to replace in excess of $300,000 worth of tools. Most of the tools probably, if we were to analyze where they went, wound up in employees' workshops. Some of them could have been sold out in the street. If you want to institute a policy whereby, let's say, the craft person is authorized to use the tool at his or her own home site, then you should consider establishing a procedure and a policy to issue tools to individuals. But before you do that, you better cover this not only with your house counsel, but with your insurance underwriter. There's a lot of companies that used to issue tools to employees and have stopped the practice because, number one, the employee was not properly trained to use the tool, and number two, when there was damage to the house or the employee hurt him or herself, there was a following lawsuit. So again, that is basically up to the policy established by your management. Now, moving on to identification tags on page 44, this is a typical identification tag. The tag itself is of hard stock. It's not a piece of paper. And you'll notice the hole up in the top is there where I may want to be able to secure either by wire or some other type of string or any other requirement to permanently make sure that that item is an integral part of the spare part it is identifying. You'll notice we have the work order number up on top. Then we have the part number, the description, the unit of measure, and the quantity. In most cases, the quantity is 1. But in some cases, if I had, let's say, a hang tag on a skid and maybe there were 2 motors that were going to be changed simultaneously on one piece of equipment, then in this case, the quantity would be 2. Again, tailor this for permanent identification of items that are going to be issued out of stores. Now, the next few documents is addressing the data processing applications in the storeroom. And one of the first issues that we want to address on page 45 are organizational responsibilities. Now, that's not maintenance management organization of the storeroom. It's the organization relative to utilizing CMMS. The easiest way to approach that is to look at who is performing in the storeroom what particular functions. And those functions should be tailored to support the users. There is a key requirement when we work with companies to utilize CMMS. The first rule is the users must define their requirements. And the second rule is the user has to generate their own data. And then the third rule is to maintain CMMS by instituting the 3 disciplines of a new part notice system, an engineering change notice system, and an obsolescence program. So the organization is by functional use. The documentation control is very simple. Don't print any document out until you're going to use it. The procedures are identical to procedures that you may have developed in a manual environment, and those procedures should be updated in terms of supporting the use of CMMS. The security and disciplines is not the security of the storeroom, but the security of the individual records within the storeroom, and that is addressed by who has the authorization to access a record or a file, who has the authorization to make changes to the records or the file, and what limits relative to quantity and dollar changes can be made to a inventory bin on hand record relative to an individual. So those security and disciplines are an integral part of who can access and make changes to files. That generally is a top management decision. Transaction validity is very simple. We have talked about the 5 transactions in the storeroom. Associated with the type of transaction is who actually performed the transaction. And here we would reference, let's say, the employee badge number. The CMMS program generally has internally the date and the time elements that transactions were generated. And if you wanted to have an audit trail, which item number 6 indicates, you can always have an audit trail printed out, or you could peruse through a transaction register through a terminal. Now, moving on to page number 46, we're looking at the different types of data processing software requirements for the storeroom. And this is just trying to initialize some of the user-defined requirements. The first, as we just identified in the previous exhibit, are security codes. Then we want to determine the type of data entry. And since there are 5 transactions in a storeroom, those would be defined, and they likewise would have a code number and can be an integral part of a window in your computerized application. The types of transaction analysis, we show the more common, which are the receipts, the disbursements, and the bin locations. And location changes would also embrace where we go through consolidation. The 5th transaction is identified starting in step number 5, which is the implementation of the cycle count program. Step number 4 indicates, as an example, that there always may be a need where you have multiple locations. In those cases, what we want to do is to consider some type of a coding system where we want to issue out of the first location that was used. In other words, what we want to accomplish is a FIFO transaction analysis. FIFO, first in, first out. And then, as item 5 indicates, we generate the cycle counting schedule, which is the date codes. We've previously talked in section 4 about the cutoff capability, and then we also want to talk about cycle counting security relative to the percentages of accuracy that we reviewed previously that have been approved by the certified public accounting profession. And the 8th item identifies who can make the adjustments both from a quantity standpoint and also from a bin location standpoint. And step number 47 is very simple, and that is the training of personnel in the storeroom relative to utilizing terminals. Now, many people that are in a manual environment today in a maintenance storeroom are probably using terminals at home. The children in even grammar school and ultimately in high school are using terminals day in and day out. It really is not a major training issue. But one of the key considerations is to have the supplier of your CMMS program also include the training for implementation of data, the training required to support the different activities, and the training required to maintain the data integrity relative to the various security requirements. These people know their software and can help you immensely in the training requirement for each and every person that is going to interrogate a CMMS. Now, some of the training requirements that are identified on page 47 indicates the type of data, and generally, in most cases, that could be menu driven by a menu number. The screen format should be able to be tailored to meet your specific requirement. Remember, the first element in computerization is user defined. That particular screen format would have a menu number. As I mentioned a moment ago, we would display the menu. There are just certain fields that would require data input, so the data would be inputted in step number 7, and then step number 8 is continue the process to the next item. Very simple. You don't have to be a typist. 2 fingers is all you need in many cases to support computerization in the maintenance storeroom. As far as hardware is concerned, there are several types of hardware to consider. One would be data entry. Now, data entry can be developed either through a terminal or it could be developed through a barcode reader. Data retrieval can be done through a terminal where all I want to do is look at some information. I could have different types of printers, and as I've indicated earlier, a printer for a work order, a printer for identification tag, a printer for the cycle count program, a printer for a receiving process, and so forth. And then last but not least, we would consider printing out, let's say, barcode applications. So going back to item 1 on page 48, data entry is what type of device are we going to use? What is the transaction? Develop the screen format, enter the data. Here you visually would verify that the data that you've included is accurate. So it's kind of your self-checking yourself. And then we would update the records and files, but remember there's always a transaction register that is recording all of the data entry. As far as the data retrieval, we have another ground rule in computerization in the storeroom. Use the terminal, don't use the printer. In most cases, all you're trying to do is get some instantaneous data. The time you use the printer is when you know what you're going to do with the document. So here again in item 2, we have the data retrieval device, terminal, printers, barcode applications, what type of a screen format are you going to have, and remember the various screens are all identified through a coding system. We have a visual display using the terminal. We have hard copy generated for documents that must be processed, and then we would have disbursement documents, which actually is issuing material from the storeroom. Again, user-defined and user-originated. Now, on the next 2 pages, I have provided a very comprehensive list of different barcode applications that we have utilized not only in the maintenance storeroom, but in the maintenance organization themselves. And let me identify for you, I'll go through this list, those items that we have used barcode applications. Number 1, the employee badge number. Number 2, the maintenance work order number. Number 3, the PM operation or sequence number within the PM work order. The maintenance work order request for, let's say, future unplanned maintenance work orders. The purchase order number, the line number on the purchase order, if there's more than one item on that PO, part identification tags, identifying basically the part number, the description, and the unit of measure would come automatically as a byproduct of the part number. The bin location number in the storeroom, the storeroom number if there's more than one, the cycle count form, and that is developed through a date code in addition to the form number itself. The maintenance work order scheduling number, and these could be identified by weekly schedules, daily schedules, and likewise shift schedules. Tool identification data, and here again all I need is the barcode for the tool number, and the description would automatically follow the part number. Similarly, on page number 49B, item 13 identifies the equipment identification, and then continuing on, 14 is the craft code by employee. 15 would be a purchase requisition number. 16 is the line number on the purchase requisition. 17 is the manufacturing asset tag that is actually affixed to a particular asset out in the operational area. 18 is a machine operator number, where we're starting to have machine operators participate in predictive maintenance or total productive maintenance applications. If we have projects, we have the project number. We're using barcoding in 21 under the 2-bin or bench stock program. 22 is the 2-bin and bench stock location number in the maintenance repair shop. 23 would be off-shift requisition numbers. 24 would be the high security identification tag numbers. 25 is the special environmental storage tag numbers. 26 would be special instructional data, which I have been referring to as special documentation needed to support a maintenance work order. And that's about the end of our experience in supporting maintenance applications with barcoding. 27 and 28 are going to be added as we gain additional applications utilizing barcoding. So you can see that we have an ample opportunity to eliminate a great deal of manual or even data entry. I call that manual because I'm still using my fingers to enter data, but we can eliminate much of that data entry through the proper design, development, and implementation and maintenance of a barcode system. Now, continuing on, we want to discuss the different training applications that I made reference to earlier in this section. There are 4 pages relative to the training requirements in a maintenance storeroom. If you remember earlier, I made reference to a very detailed training program. So let's start off with the item number 1 on page 50A and talk about some of these training elements. But before we do, I want to address the time element of training. Training is not let's say, a weekly seminar. What I have addressed here are training elements that can be done, let's say, within a half hour to an hour and no more. We don't want to stretch the training out where it really is not giving the individuals, our maintenance storeroom personnel, the opportunity to institute what they've learned through training. So as we go through these different elements, consider the length of time and also consider some workshop applications. Actually, hands-on training is the best approach that I know of. And once you accomplish that, you want to make certain that every element that the storeroom person is trained in, that again, his or her training data is signed by that employee, and it should be put in that person's personnel record. Now let me walk you through the training steps now. First one is receiving. The second is how are we going to identify material? What methods are we going to use? What are the storage methods that we are going to use in our storeroom? How do we identify the location system? How do we count material? What are the quality control steps relative to receive and inspection? What does record accuracy mean relative to supporting the cycle counting program? What are consolidation procedures and how are they performed and reported? Overflow procedures indicates that I have put material into, let's say, a storage bin, yet there is additional material that I can't put into this general area by commodity or family code, so I may have to put that in some other area. And that has to be identified and recorded. And then what are the procedures that we're going to use to move that material back into the proper storage area for that particular item within a family or commodity code? What are our disbursement procedures relative to issuing material out? And what are we issuing material against? What are the physical inventory procedures if we're not doing cycle counting? And as item 12 indicates, what are the cycle counting procedures and the training associated with that? Now, continuing on to page 50B, we have the various inventory control procedures. In a smaller organization, people from the storeroom may perform inventory management applications, as I mentioned earlier. Now, this is not a half hour to an hour training. There may be 1 to 2 days of continuous training, or maybe we would be training 1 hour per day over, let's say, 1 to 2 weeks. Again, it depends upon the subject matter. Item number 14 are the record adjustment procedures and record adjustment authorization. 15 is the security of the storeroom. And 16 are the shelf life code procedures and the subsequent disposition of items that have gone beyond the shelf life and that are still in the storeroom. And 17 are the safety requirements. And 18 are the housekeeping requirements. In housekeeping, I'm not talking about just the cleanliness of the storeroom itself, but also keeping items, within their respective bin locations, and likewise supporting some of the safety requirements. 19 are the delivery procedures to the job site. And 20 the equipment maintenance procedures that we would maintain the equipment within the storeroom. 21 addresses the layout, and 22 are the types of management support that we may need, like the support for 100% security of the storeroom. And we get into 23, which is the shipping steps. 24 are the commodity codes, and 25 are the inventory classification codes. And we will continue with the various training functions, which are also recorded on page 50C.